Long before modern computers existed, before screens, programming languages, or digital networks transformed human civilization, one woman imagined a machine that could manipulate symbols, follow instructions, and perform operations beyond simple calculation. At a time when mathematics was considered a rigid and mechanical discipline, she saw something far more profound. She imagined a future where machines could process patterns, create music, and extend the power of human thought itself. Her name was Ada Lovelace. Today she is often described as the world's first computer programmer, but that title alone does not fully capture the scale of her vision. Ada Lovelace did not merely write instructions for a machine. She recognized possibilities that even many of her contemporaries could not yet comprehend. In an age powered by steam engines and mechanical invention, she saw the earliest outline of the digital future. Ada Lovelace was born Augusta Ada Byron in 1815 in London. Her father was the famous poet Lord Byron, one of the most celebrated and controversial literary figures of the era. Her mother, Annabella Mulbanky, was deeply interested in mathematics and logic, qualities that sharply contrasted with Byron's emotional and unpredictable personality. Their marriage collapsed shortly after Ada's birth, and she would never truly know her father, who left England and died when she was still a child. Her mother feared that Ada might inherit Byron's temperament. Determined to guide her toward discipline and reason, she encouraged a rigorous education focused on mathematics, science, and logic. This was highly unusual for a girl in 19th century England, where advanced scientific education for women was rare and often discouraged. Ada's upbringing was strict, but intellectually rich. From an early age, she showed a fascination with machinery and systems. As a child, she studied birds and attempted to design a flying machine, carefully examining how wings moved and how motion could be controlled. She approached imagination through structure, combining creativity with analytical thinking in a way that would later define her work. Her education exposed her to some of the leading scientific minds of the time. She studied mathematics under respected tutors and developed a reputation for unusual intelligence and curiosity. Unlike many students who saw mathematics as abstract symbols, Ada viewed it as a language capable of describing deep relationships and patterns within the world. This perspective would become central to her later ideas. In 1833, when Ada was still a teenager, she met Charles Babbage, a mathematician and inventor who was working on a revolutionary machine called the difference engine. The machine was designed to perform mathematical calculations automatically, reducing the errors common in human computation. At first glance, it appeared to be a sophisticated calculator, but Babbage's ambitions extended further. He envisioned an even more advanced device called the Analytical Engine, a machine capable of performing a wide range of operations through programmable instructions. Unlike the difference engine, which had a fixed purpose, the Analytical Engine was designed to be flexible. It would use punch cards to process instructions, store information, and carry out sequences of operations automatically. In many ways, it resembled the basic architecture of modern computers. Most people who encountered Babbage's ideas struggled to grasp their significance. The machine was too far ahead of existing technology, and many saw it as impractical or overly ambitious. Ada saw something different. She immediately understood that the Analytical Engine was not merely a machine for arithmetic. It was a machine for manipulating symbols according to rules. Numbers, in her view, could represent more than quantity. They could represent relationships, patterns, even music and art if properly encoded. This insight was extraordinary. At a time when even the idea of programmable machinery was barely understood, Ada imagined machines operating on abstract information itself. She recognized that computation was not limited to mathematics. It could become a universal process for handling symbolic systems. Her collaboration with Babbage deepened over time. She studied the design of the Analytical Engine closely, asking questions, discussing possibilities, and exploring how such a machine could operate. Babbage respected her intellect and referred to her as the enchantress of numbers. recognizing both her technical understanding and her imaginative reach. In 1843, Ada translated an article written by the Italian engineer Luigi Minabrea about the analytical engine. But she did far more than translate. She added extensive notes of her own, notes that eventually became longer than the original article itself. Within these notes, she described how the machine could calculate Bernoulli numbers through a sequence of operations. This set of instructions is widely considered the first published computer program. Yet the program itself was only part of the achievement. More important were the ideas surrounding it. Ada explained concepts that anticipated modern computing, including the separation between hardware and instructions, the possibility of looping operations, and the idea that machines could process information beyond numbers alone. She was imagining a future no one else could yet see clearly. A future where machines would not simply calculate, but transform how humans create, communicate, and think. And all of this emerged from the mind of a woman working in a century that had not even invented electricity-powered computers yet. As Ada Lovelace continued working with Charles Babbage's Analytical Engine, her understanding of the machine grew beyond that of nearly everyone around her. Most people still viewed the engine as an advanced calculating device, something useful perhaps for mathematics or engineering. Ada, however, recognized that its significance was far deeper. She saw that the machine represented a completely new kind of relationship between human thought and mechanical process. This insight separated her from her era. The 19th century was dominated by mechanical invention. Steam engines powered factories, railways transformed transportation, and industrial systems reshaped society. Machines were associated with physical labor and repetitive tasks. They moved objects, produced goods, and increased industrial efficiency. Ada imagined something entirely different. She imagined a machine capable of operating on symbols and instructions, not just physical materials. In her view, the analytical engine could manipulate patterns according to defined rules, making it fundamentally different from earlier machines. This idea would later become the foundation of computer science, but in her time, it was almost impossible for many people to fully grasp. Her famous notes on the analytical engine revealed the depth of this vision. While translating Luigi Minabrea's article, Ada expanded the work into a detailed exploration of how the machine could function. She explained not only what the engine was designed to do, but how it might be programmed to carry out sequences of operations automatically. This was revolutionary. She described methods that resembled modern programming concepts, including step-by-step instructions, repeated operations, and a logical organization of calculations. Her work on Bernoulli numbers demonstrated how a machine could follow a precise sequence without human intervention once the instructions were provided. In modern terms, she was describing an algorithm. What made her contribution extraordinary was not simply that she created instructions for a machine, but that she understood the broader implications of programmable systems. She realized that a machine following symbolic instructions could theoretically process any form of information that could be represented systematically. This led to one of her most remarkable insights. Ada suggested that the analytical engine might one day compose music if the rules of harmony and composition could be translated into symbolic form. This idea sounded almost fantastical in the 19th century, yet it anticipated modern digital creativity, where computers generate music, images, and complex forms of media. She was not claiming that machines could think independently. In fact, she argued that machines do only what humans instruct them to do. This later became known as Lady Lovelace's objection in discussions about artificial intelligence. Yet even while emphasizing the machine's dependence on human instructions, she recognized that its range of possible operations could be immense. This balance in her thinking was important. She combined imagination with caution, seeing both the potential and the limits of computation. She did not confuse mechanical process with human consciousness, but she understood that symbolic processing itself could become extraordinarily powerful. Despite the brilliance of her ideas, Ada faced significant barriers. Victorian society did not easily accept women in scientific or mathematical fields. Although she moved within intellectual circles and had access to influential figures, her opportunities remained constrained by social expectations. Many women of the period were discouraged from advanced intellectual work altogether. Ada persisted anyway. She continued studying mathematics intensely, corresponding with scientists and exploring increasingly abstract ideas. Her ambition extended beyond simply assisting Babbage. She wanted to contribute original insight, to participate in the shaping of a new scientific future. At the same time, her personal life grew more complicated. In 1835, she married William King, who later became the Earl of Lovelace, making her Countess of Lovelace. The marriage brought social status and responsibilities, and Ada became the mother of 3 children. Balancing intellectual pursuits with the expectations placed upon aristocratic women was difficult, yet she continued her mathematical work whenever possible. Her personality was intense and complex. Like her father, Lord Byron, she possessed strong imagination and emotional depth, but unlike him, she directed much of that intensity toward analytical thought. She often described her approach as poetical science, a combination of creativity and logic. To Ada, mathematics was not cold or mechanical. It was imaginative, expressive, and deeply connected to the hidden structures of reality. This combination made her unusual even among intellectuals. She could move between abstract mathematics and visionary speculation with ease. While some scientists focused only on practical mechanisms, Ada asked what such mechanisms might eventually mean for humanity itself. Meanwhile, Babbage struggled to complete the analytical engine. The machine was enormously ambitious and required engineering precision beyond what the era could easily provide. Funding problems, political conflicts, and technical challenges repeatedly delayed the project. As years passed, the engine remained largely theoretical, existing mainly in designs and partial components rather than as a fully functioning machine. This limitation affected Ada deeply. She understood the power of the concept, yet she lived in a time when the technology needed to fully realize it did not yet exist. In a sense, her ideas had outrun her century. The world around her was still mechanical, while her imagination had already begun moving toward the digital age. Even so, her notes endured. Though not widely recognized during her lifetime, they preserved concepts that would later become central to computing. Long before electronic computers, programming languages, or software engineering, Ada Lovelace had articulated principles that modern computer science would eventually rediscover and expand. She had looked at a machine made of gears and metal and seen something far greater, a new form of human capability, a system that could extend thought itself through symbolic process and instruction. And as her life continued, that vision would become both her greatest achievement and the reason history would one day remember her far beyond the limits of her own era. As Ada Lovelace moved further into adulthood, her intellectual ambitions became increasingly difficult to separate from the limits imposed by the society around her. She lived in a world where women, particularly aristocratic women, were expected to focus on social duties, family life, and polite accomplishments rather than serious scientific work. Yet Ada continued pushing toward mathematics and analytical thought with unusual determination, convinced that the future of machines and symbolic reasoning held possibilities that most people had not yet imagined. Her relationship with Charles Babbage remained central during this period. The two shared a rare intellectual connection. Babbage respected Ada not simply as an admirer of his work, but as someone capable of understanding the deeper implications of the analytical engine. He was the engineer and inventor, focused heavily on the mechanics of the machine itself. Ada often operated on another level, exploring what the machine represented conceptually. This difference mattered. Babbage designed a machine capable of performing operations. Ada saw a machine capable of processing systems of symbols in ways that could eventually reshape knowledge itself. She was moving toward ideas that resembled modern computational theory, even though the necessary technology still did not exist. Her notes on the Analytical Engine continue to circulate among intellectual circles, though their importance was not yet fully appreciated. Most readers focused on the machine's mathematical functions. Few recognized how radical Ada's broader insights truly were. She was describing the possibility of generalized computation, the idea that a single machine could perform different tasks depending on the instructions it received. Today, this seems obvious because modern computers operate exactly this way. But in the 19th century, machines were usually built for one fixed purpose: a loom weaved fabric, a steam engine powered movement, a calculator performed arithmetic. Ada imagined something more flexible, a machine whose behavior could change according to symbolic instructions. This conceptual leap was extraordinary. It suggested that machinery could move beyond physical repetition into abstract manipulation. Information itself could become the object of mechanical operation. Ada's idea that machines might one day create music was particularly striking. She reasoned that if musical notes and harmonic structures could be represented symbolically, then an engine following the correct rules could compose complex pieces. This was not merely a prediction about technology. It reflected her broader understanding that computation could apply to any structured system, not just numbers. In many ways, she was anticipating the modern digital world. Today, computers generate music, images, writing, simulations, and entire virtual environments. The foundations of these capabilities lie in symbolic processing, the same principle Ada identified while studying the Analytical Engine. Yet her life itself was becoming increasingly unstable. Ada struggled with recurring health problems throughout adulthood. She experienced chronic pain, periods of physical weakness, and illnesses that limited her activity. Medical treatments of the era were often harsh and ineffective, sometimes worsening conditions rather than improving them. At the same time, she carried emotional intensity that could become destructive. Like her father, Lord Byron, Ada possessed a restless and impulsive side. She was fascinated not only by mathematics, but also by risk, speculation, and systems of probability. At one point, she became deeply involved in gambling on horse races, attempting to apply mathematical models to predict outcomes. This reflected both her brilliance and her vulnerability. She believed patterns existed everywhere and that careful analysis could uncover them. But human systems, unlike machines, are rarely fully predictable. Her gambling schemes failed, leading to financial and emotional strain. Even so, her intellectual confidence remained strong. Ada continued exploring scientific ideas and discussing ambitious projects. She hoped to contribute further to mathematics and computation, though the opportunities available to her remained limited. The unfinished state of the Analytical Engine also weighed heavily on her. She knew the machine represented something revolutionary, but she lived in a time incapable of fully building it. This sense of being ahead of her era defined much of her life. She could see possibilities that others either dismissed or could not yet understand. Her imagination stretched beyond the mechanical age into something closer to the information age, but she lacked the technological and institutional support needed to fully realize those ideas. Her health deteriorated further in the early 1850s. Doctors diagnosed her with uterine cancer, the same disease that had killed her mother. Treatments were painful and largely ineffective, involving heavy use of opiates and other harsh methods common in Victorian medicine. As her condition worsened, Ada's life narrowed physically, but her intellectual legacy remained quietly preserved in her writings. In 1852, at only 36 years old, Ada Lovelace died in London. She was buried beside her father, Lord Byron, whom she had barely known in life. At the time of her death, she was not widely celebrated as a scientific pioneer. The Analytical Engine itself had never been fully constructed, and the world had not yet entered the age of computing that would eventually make her insights seem astonishingly prophetic. For decades after her death, her work remained relatively obscure. The 19th century moved forward through industrial expansion. while electronic computing still lay far in the future. Many of her ideas seemed abstract, speculative, or impractical to her contemporaries. But history was slowly moving toward the world she had imagined. A world where machines would process symbols, follow programs, generate information, and reshape civilization itself. And hidden within her notes was one of the earliest visions of that future. For many years after Ada Lovelace's death in 1852, her name remained largely in the background of scientific history. The world had not yet reached the technological stage necessary to fully understand what she had seen in Charles Babbage's Analytical Engine. Steam power still dominated industry. Mechanical systems defined engineering, and computation remained tied to human calculation and specialized devices. Ada's ideas existed almost like messages sent forward in time, waiting for an era capable of receiving them. That era would arrive much later. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, technology began moving closer to the kind of programmable systems Ada had imagined. Mechanical calculators improved, electrical engineering advanced, and scientists increasingly searched for ways to automate complex operations. Yet even then, few people connected these developments to Ada Lovelace's writings. The true significance of her work only became clear with the rise of modern computing. During the 20th century, especially around the Second World War, the development of programmable electronic machines transformed science and technology. Computers capable of following stored instructions emerged, first for military and mathematical purposes, then gradually for broader applications. Suddenly, many of Ada's ideas no longer seemed speculative. They seemed visionary. The realization that machines could process symbols according to instructions, perform different tasks depending on programming, and manipulate information rather than merely calculate numbers became the foundation of computer science. What Ada had described in the 19th century now defined the digital age. Her notes on the Analytical Engine gained new attention. Historians and scientists revisiting her work recognized how advanced her thinking had been. She had not simply assisted Babbage or translated an article. She had articulated conceptual principles central to modern computing decades before the technology existed to implement them. This distinction became increasingly important. Charles Babbage designed the machine, but Ada explored what such a machine could mean. She moved beyond mechanics into abstraction, beyond engineering into theory. She recognized that computation was not tied exclusively to arithmetic. It was a process that could operate on any symbolic system. This idea lies at the heart of the modern digital world. Computers today process text, images, sound, video, financial systems, scientific models, and artificial intelligence because all of these can be represented symbolically. Ada anticipated this principle at a time when even mechanical calculators were considered advanced technology. Her insight about music became especially symbolic of her broader vision, when she suggested that machines might compose music if the rules of harmony could be translated into symbolic operations. She was effectively predicting creative computation. Today, algorithms generate music, visual art, writing, and simulations, all based on symbolic processing systems remarkably similar in principle to what she imagined. Yet Ada's legacy is not only technological. Her life also represents the struggle of intellectual ambition against social limitation. As a woman in Victorian England, she operated within a society that placed significant restrictions on female participation in science and mathematics. Even with her social status and connections, she faced barriers that many male thinkers of her era did not. Opportunities were limited, recognition was uneven, and serious intellectual work by women was often treated with skepticism. Despite this, she persisted. She pursued mathematics passionately, engaged with some of the leading scientific ideas of her age, and contributed original thought in a field that barely existed yet. Her example would later inspire generations of women entering science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Over time, her recognition grew steadily. Programming languages, academic institutions, and scientific awards were named in her honor. In 1980, the United States Department of Defense developed a programming language called Ada, acknowledging her foundational role in the history of computing. This was more than symbolic recognition. It represented the realization that her ideas had become part of the infrastructure of the modern world. The digital systems shaping communication, finance, medicine, entertainment, and global information networks all depend on principles connected to programmable computation, the same conceptual territory Ada explored in the 19th century. What makes her story especially compelling is how imagination and logic coexisted within her work. Ada did not separate creativity from mathematics. She believed analytical thinking could reveal hidden structures, while imagination could extend those structures into new possibilities. Her phrase, poetical science, captured this union perfectly. To her, science was not cold machinery. It was a creative exploration of patterns and relationships. This perspective feels strikingly modern. Today, the boundaries between technology and creativity continue to blur. Digital tools are used not only for calculation, but also for art, design, storytelling, music, and simulation. The world Ada imagined, where symbolic machines interact with human creativity, has become everyday reality. And yet, there's also a sense of tragedy in her story. She died before seeing any practical realization of the future she anticipated. The Analytical Engine was never completed during her lifetime. Electronic computing lay nearly a century ahead. Much of what she understood existed only in potential, visible to her mind but not yet to the world around her. Still, ideas do not disappear simply because their time has not arrived. Ada Lovelace's writing survived, carrying forward a vision of programmable machines and symbolic computation into generations that would finally have the tools to make those ideas real. And as the modern world increasingly became shaped by software, algorithms, and digital systems, her place in history began to shift from obscure mathematician to one of the earliest architects of the information age itself. As the 21st century continues to unfold, the scale of Ada Lovelace's vision becomes more astonishing with each passing decade. The world now lives inside systems that operate according to the very principles she described long before modern computers existed. Billions of people interact daily with machines that process symbols, follow instructions, store information, generate creative works, and shape communication across the planet. The future Ada imagined has become reality. Every smartphone, every search engine, every digital network, every artificial intelligence system relies on programmable computation, the idea that a machine can follow structured instructions to manipulate information. This concept now forms the backbone of modern civilization. Yet Ada understood its essence while studying a theoretical machine made of gears and punch cards in the 19th century. What makes her achievement extraordinary is not merely that she anticipated computers. It is that she understood their broader meaning. Many inventors create tools without fully grasping how those tools will reshape society. Ada looked beyond machinery itself and recognized that symbolic processing could transform human capability. She saw computation not as a specialized mathematical technique, but as a universal method for handling patterns, relationships, and systems. This insight remains central today. Modern computing is no longer confined to arithmetic. It powers medicine, transportation, finance, communication, entertainment, engineering, and scientific research. It creates music, images, films, and virtual worlds. It analyzes genomes, predicts weather, guides spacecraft, and supports artificial intelligence. All of these developments emerge from the same principle Ada identified. Information can be represented symbolically, processed systematically, and manipulated through programmed operations. Her idea that machines might one day compose music now feels almost prophetic. Algorithms today generate symphonies, digital paintings, written language, and complex simulations. Artificial intelligence systems can mimic conversation, analyze patterns, and assist in creative production. While these technologies remain tools rather than conscious minds, they operate within the conceptual framework Ada described, machines extending human capability through symbolic processing. Her caution about machine intelligence also remains relevant. Ada argued that machines do not originate thought independently. They follow instructions and operate within structures humans create. This observation continues to shape debates about artificial intelligence today. Questions about creativity, consciousness, automation, and human control all reflect issues she recognized in their earliest form. What is remarkable is how balanced her thinking was. She combined vision with restraint, imagination with logic. She saw extraordinary potential in computational systems, but she did not confuse mechanical process with human awareness. This clarity gives her work a depth that still feels modern rather than outdated. Her life also carries enduring importance beyond technology itself. Ada Lovelace became a symbol of intellectual persistence in a society that often denied women full participation in science and mathematics. She pursued analytical work in a world where such ambitions were considered inappropriate for many women, and she did so not quietly, but with confidence and originality. Generations later, her story gained new meaning. As women increasingly entered scientific and technological fields, Ada emerged as a historical figure proving that foundational insight and innovation were never limited by gender. Her example inspired programmers, mathematicians, engineers, and researchers who saw in her life both brilliance and resilience. Today, conferences, institutions, scholarships, and educational programs carry her name. Ada Lovelace Day is celebrated internationally to recognize the achievements of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Universities teach her writings not merely as historical curiosity, but as genuine intellectual contributions to the origins of computer science. And yet, there remains something almost haunting about her story. She lived in a world unable to fully realize her ideas. The machines she imagined did not yet exist in practical form. The digital age, the internet, software engineering, artificial intelligence, all of it lay far beyond her lifetime. She died at only 36 years old. A short life filled with illness, emotional intensity, and unfinished potential. But ideas are not limited by the lifespans of those who create them. Ada's vision survived because it describes something fundamental about the future relationship between humans and machines. As technology advanced, the world slowly moved toward concepts she had already articulated. What once seemed abstract became practical. What seemed impossible became ordinary. In the end, Ada Lovelace's legacy is not only that she wrote the first computer program, it is that she recognized the true nature of programmable machines before the modern world itself existed. She understood that computation was not merely calculation. It was a new language for shaping reality through information and instruction. That understanding helped lay the intellectual foundation for the digital civilization humanity now inhabits. Every algorithm, every software system, every programmable device carries traces of the conceptual world she first glimpsed through the unfinished designs of the Analytical Engine. A future imagined by a woman standing nearly 2 centuries before it arrived. And even now, as technology continues evolving into forms she could never fully predict, her central insight remains alive, that machines guided by symbolic logic could profoundly extend the reach of human thought itself.